Hello everybody and welcome to the IMB World Series League's GT3 Championship here from Le Mans. It's the second of our endurance rounds in our 10-round season. Still Bathurst and Sebring to come in the weeks to come in this championship, but for now we focus our attentions on Le Mans, one of the fastest race circuits in the world, certainly one of the most historic, and it's seen a lot of racing down the years, but not that much GT3 racing. We're about to change that here tonight for our 75-minute race that we are stretching a little bit to call an endurance, but it is going to be very, very interesting with a pit stop required and lots of good racing as well, hopefully. My name is Ewan O'Leary. I'm alongside David Gilligan for the evening. David, it's great to have you alongside me for this one. And it's going to be a fantastic race, but a long one. It is a stretch to call this endurance, but it's Le Mans, so there's a lot to look forward to.
It certainly is, yes, absolutely. And, well, first of all, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody who may well be watching along at home, wherever you are watching in the world. Yes, GT3 cars, great things to go racing with. You know, they're straddle that nice in-between line between your top-end cars, like your World Endurance hypercar cars or Formula One cars, Indy cars, that sort of thing, these high downforce monsters. And then all the way down the other end, especially got things like your touring cars or, you know, God forbid, your things like your Mazdas and things like that when you first start iRacing and things of that nature. So they're a nice little in-between area. You've got lots of performance, lots of power, lots of downforce, but then just enough wiggle room for the drivers to really start kicking the back end out and things like that. So hopefully we're going to see a great deal of good racing here.
I think we certainly will. There was a Le Mans round on the last season, of course, and it was, or was it 2 seasons ago? Maybe both. But we had a fantastic time. There was lots of good racing throughout, and hopefully over a slightly extended distance to what we have normally, this will be much the same. We've had some good rounds so far as well. 3 rounds into this championship we are now, and let's take you a little bit through where we're standing in the championship for what it's worth, less than a third of the way through the season. It doesn't mean a whole lot, but we'll show it to you anyway, because it does give us a little bit of a form guide. Stuart Reynolds is currently leading the Pro Drivers' Championship right now, which is interesting to note since he actually didn't get a lap in during qualifying. That is going to hurt him, certainly, with John Williams only 4 points behind. Chris Chatterton in the 3rd place ahead of Hakan Lindmo. Then there's Lucas Romano inside the top 5. We've got Taylor Lane, Kaidiel up there in the 7th place, Johannes Traub, Harry Wills and Lars Devan on the top 10. Juho Huutonen just outside. Albin Kjellberg struggling a little bit, unfortunately, especially compared to his pace. James Pearce, 13th ahead of Max Furtwängler, and also Jason Dilworth, who has joined for this round here today for Prasad Nomad. He's a very experienced driver, especially in a GT3. We'll see what he can do today. Pro-Am standings are as follows, with Eva van der Linden leading at the moment. Marcel Breitenbach currently in 2nd ahead of Jeremy de Boyver. Then there's Thomas Pugh and Francois Perdreau, top 5. Dean Timsid ahead of Vlank, all up there. All of those drivers, by the way, separated by only about 37 points at this stage. It's very, very close. Timothy Vanderbroek, 8th place ahead of Louis Boubier, who's just taken overall pole in the qualifying session. That was a turn up for the books. Dirk Bout's running at the top 10 with Gene Breitenbach, who couldn't get a lap in. Mark Fleming is 12th ahead of Simon Dodd, who's returning this round. Stuart Reines in the 14th place ahead of Chris Thacker. Then it's Peter Lemkens and also Ashravel Haddad, who hasn't actually scored any points for finishing positions so far this season. Only the penalty points next to his name right now. Sam Bamrula has the biggest championship advantage of anyone in AM, ahead of Carl Pearce. Then there's Navarro de Boiva and Yarmosas de Moynihan. James Slates rounds out the top 5. Then it's Jürgen Knockout. We've got Gus Franken in 7th, ahead of Johan Polnus. Matthias de Groot and Archie Lanz in the top 10. Jeroen Reigns is 11th, ahead of Kurt van Hoornacker. Timo McKeon, Conor Botting, Tony van der Linden, and Mark Bailey rounding out the 16 AM drivers as well. As I said, David, it's not too... Daniel even. Goodness. Yeah, dear me. David Christie was supposed to be joining me today, by the way. It's frazzled me like you wouldn't believe. Anyway, Daniel, it's it's a bit of a arbitrary thing to look at it only 3 rounds into a 10-round season, to be fair, but it's good to know where the form guide is, and it's notable, very notable, that our overall championship leader hasn't been able to set a lap time in qualifying.
It's very interesting indeed, yeah. It's one of those things that can occasionally throw something a little bit into the mix, can't it? And when you end up seeing these things, you know, there are certainly some seasons in real-world motorsport where you've at the start of the season, it's looked as though everything is over, and then all of a sudden, over the course of the season, it turns out through things like strategy mistakes, car development in series where that is appropriate, and so on, ends up then swinging the advantage back into a different direction. So certainly, yep, 3 rounds in, maybe not the time to be calling it just yet, shall we say, but certainly one of these scenarios where you can take a look and you can start to see where those initial protagonists are to be found. And then, yeah, absolutely, if you have the leader of the championship not setting a lap time in qualifying, and then, well, that's one of a few different things that could be going through their head. It could be that they're very, very confident. They think they can just carve their way through the entire field in this 75 or so minutes. Or maybe, you know, as is probably a bit more likely, there's been some technical issues or some such a thing which has prevented them from taking part. So then it will be a case of damage limitation, really, given the tight spread of the field there for those drivers right at the top end in particular.
We did see Reynolds did actually get out onto the circuit, but invalidated both his lap times in that particular case. So yeah, there was some stopping him from qualifying well. Francois Perdreau, as you can see here, has kindly given him an insight, given us an insight into what he's doing right now, and we can look back at him to see quite what's going on for him through the S's here, the Porsche curves, right at the very end of this circuit. We've got a number of onboard cameras we'll be able to show you throughout the day, with a number of our drivers that we have here on the circuit this evening. And it's good to see what people's setups are really like, because it's quite a talking point these days in sim racing. You know, 6 to 7 years ago or whatever, everyone would have just had a standard wheel and a one monitor, and that's absolutely fine. But these days you've got all kinds of options with triple screens, ultra wide screens, VR headsets, and all these kind of things. It's more interesting than ever to look what these guys are using down on the down in the sim.
Absolutely, yeah, and obviously there comes a certain point where there's a great deal of talent that can overcome perhaps some of your technical limitations. You know, there's a driver that I know, for example, who's one of the quickest out there in pretty much anything they turn their hand to. But then you look at what they've got, and they've got relatively mundane equipment when you compare it to the likes of what is out there these days. Things like big direct drive wheels. You mentioned things like VR as well, of course, and other bits and pieces which can then offer that different perspective, I think, and different ways and means. I mean, I'm one of these drivers who's been able to get themselves a VR headset in the last couple of years or so, and you know, for me at least, I've been able to find that actually being in VR, it helps me to catch slides more quickly and more earlier in the corners. For whatever reason, if I then experience the same car behavior when I'm just looking at the screen, I can never figure it out quickly enough. So there are definitely perks and benefits, but I can tell you that in an endurance race, and again, we are sort of stretching the limits of what is considered endurance with today's race here, but in an endurance race, if you've got a computer strapped to your face for a long old time, it does make the neck hurt ever so slightly.
I was going to ask a little bit about that, since you've actually got experience with a VR headset. The main criticism it got initially when it was brought into sim racing and brought into gaming, I guess, as well, is that you can't really wear it for real long periods of time, because it's going to start wearing on you just a little bit. But is it comfortable to drive, even for a 75-minute race? You know, we're calling it endurance. It's a stretch, as we've mentioned. It's not the longest time, but is that even, you know, a long time to be wearing a VR headset, or is it actually not that bad?
I think it's going to depend on the individual, of course. I mean, it's, in my instance, having gotten used to it now, and you know, I never really experienced any sort of motion sickness either with it, which of course an awful lot of people do when they try VR. But it's one of those things. I think 75 minutes probably going to be something they'll be able to put up with just fine. But if they are then struggling a bit more, then, well, we'll see. But we've got the grid here then, and do you want to take us away on this one here, Ewan?
Yeah, let's have a quick look down who is where, with Harry Wills on the pole position here ahead of Chris Chatterton. John Williams is third, ahead of Jason Dilworth, making his first appearance of the season. Kai Diel here as well inside the top five, with Lucas Romano sixth, Taylor Lane seventh, ahead of Hakin Lindmo, and on the back row is Max Furtwängler and Stuart Reynolds on the back row together. Neither of those managing to get a time in. Luz Bouvier set the fastest time of anybody, but he'll be on Pro-Am pole ahead of Timothy Vanderbroek. Then it is Chris Thacker and Jeremy De Boyver. Dean Timms is rounding out the top five with Stuart Wanister. Eva van der Linden is seventh ahead of Francois Perdreau. Marcel Breitenbach ninth ahead of Mark Fleming. Then it is Dirk Bouts and Thomas Pugh on row six, and Jim Breitenbach with Dieter de Vlamink on the seventh row together as well. The AM drivers are as follows as well, with Carl Pearce leading the field away there. Archie Lance will be second ahead of Navarro de Boyver. Then it will be championship leader Sam Van Ruler from fourth. James Straits will be fifth ahead of Jomas Moinen. Gus Franken will be seventh ahead of Kurt Van Hohenacker, with Tony van der Linden and Jerome Reigns inside the top 10. Matthias de Groot and Jurgen Knockaert round out the 12 drivers in the AM field. We already have Yoma Sestomoinen, a non-starter, will be starting from the pit lane, excuse me, here, and they're rolling through the Porsche curves for the first time on the formation lap. Sestomoinen clearly wasn't able to get onto the grid quite quickly enough, and so the 36th and final driver will be starting from the pit lane. It's a slightly bizarre situation here, Daniel, to see one of the Pro-Am drivers faster than everybody. Lewis Boubier was faster than any of the pros as well, which is a bizarre situation, but we've sorted them all out into Pro-Am and Am. They'll all be starting separately and hopefully be off to a clean start with those slightly smaller numbers. Maybe we can get everyone through turn 1 and 2 cleanly.
Hopefully we can, yes. I mean, that's obviously the best thing, is the thing which everybody is always told in the world of racing, of course, whether it be the virtual or real world, and that is you can't win it at the first corner, but you can certainly lose it. So it's so yes, we've got everybody getting themselves ready to go, and I'll let you take us away for this race start here.
Oh, it should be an exciting one. Let's see, 75 minutes on the clock. And one mandatory pit stop as well. At the Nordschleife, for our first endurance of the season, the drivers were actually forced to take 2 stops as the fuel didn't quite stretch far enough. Are we going to see something similar today at Le Mans, or are we going to get it done with only 1 stop here throughout the 75 minutes? We'll of course have a much better idea about that about 40 or so minutes into this race, but that is coming in quite some time. Harry Wills will be taking the front though, with Chris Chatterton alongside in an All Prestana Nomad outside line going towards turn 1 here. Oh, Mats Furtwanger already going, trying to preempt the lights going out, and Harry Wills going for this, and now he does so, but made them wait quite some considerable time beforehand. He gets already 2 or 3 car lengths over the rest, with Chatterton and Dilworth on the outside line making good progress. Through the first sweeper they'll go into the chicane itself. It's looking clean for the 10 pros as things stand right now. A little bit of contact there between Lucas Romano and one of the Lamborghinis. That's Kai Niel on the outside line holding tough, and they get into contact. Romano off the road, he slammed into the wall, down the hill towards the S's and towards Tete Rouge. I'm afraid it's already been a difficult start for some. Hakim Lindbo has also got involved. A 3-car incident on the opening lap in Pro, as the Pro-Ams will aim to get underway, hopefully a little bit more cleanly than that as well. Underway they go as well. Lewis Boubier wanting to get a clean start here. It was all Mercedes at the front of Pro. It's all BMW at the front of Pro-Am. Single file through here. But it was all looking so good for the pros until there was drama on the run down the hill. Such a shame to see for those 3 drivers. Under the bridge they will go in Pro-Am, and a considerably smaller gap between the Pro-Ams and the Ams themselves. They'll get underway here as well. Carl Pearce sending them 3 wide for second. Archie Lands with Navarro de Boiva reduce it to 2. Through the chicane they'll go, and they'll well, it's clean racing in the end. Navarro de Boiva getting through with Archie Lands falling back just a little bit. They'll run down the hill and towards the Tete Rouge section, where you need that good exit onto the Mulsanne straight. But there's already some very big gaps opening up in Pro here, Daniel, after a very, very difficult start and a bit of contact for some as well, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely, and these things happen in racing, of course, as the cars constantly jostling for position with one another, trying to make their way through and forwards, because, of course, you don't want to really lose any positions off the start. Even if you are a quicker driver, of course, it's much, much more difficult to try and make those positions up and try and get those overtakes versus then making your way through the field from a great position up at the front.
Down in towards the Mulsanne corner they'll go, and these are the Pro-Ams, a lot closer back here. The front 2 getting away a little bit with Boubier and Vanderbroek at 1 and 2 right now. Chris Thacker's got his way up to 3rd place for Eclipse. You can see the black, purple and blue car in the background. One of the more iconic liveries of this series. They're all in one line. And bump drafting as well between Harry Wills and Kai Diel. Harry Wills from the very front initially got off to a good start, but clearly it hasn't been going well for very long, because he's already fallen into trouble, and he's fallen down to 8th place right now. They've caught Stuart Reynolds as well, have they? Well, they've caught one of the Audis. Looks like could be Jarmo Sostamoinen actually. He had to start from the pit lane and has actually got out miles in front of everybody else in the Anfield, which is going to take some sorting out in some time. There's Stuart Winers down at the Mulsanne corner getting underway again for Pro-Ams. We've also seen James Slates back to the pit lane as well as Lucas Romano, presumably after a bit of contact on the first lap. But coming towards the end of the opening lap, I feel very, very spread out in the pros, which I have to say wasn't too was a big surprise really. I was expecting it to stay very close, especially in the pros for quite some time, but that's not been the case.
No, absolutely not. And it's one of these things then where, of course, in an endurance race, typically what you tend to end up seeing is you'll see that when we've got a much longer time frame than this, it tends to be your first half an hour and your last half an hour, the majority of the action tends to really happen. But then, of course, that sort of middling period where everyone goes on to the different varying strategies, everybody starts to fan out and spread away from one another before they then all start to reconverge again. So yeah, things may be going to converge a bit earlier than planned.
Well, let's see. It's just over a second between 1 and 2 at the moment. Chris Chatterton and John Williams. Kai Diel's come into the pit lane at the end of lap 1 as well. He was involved in a bit of contact, let's not forget. And so that might be one of the reasons behind that call. Certainly not a tactical one, you would imagine, after only 1 lap. Max Furtwängler here has managed to make his way up the order. This is Jason Dilworth not too far behind, and well, there's going to be a change of position there for 4th place. Stuart Reynolds has made good progress here, up to 6th place, and the field not massively big in the pro field, which has of course helped. It's helped Stuart Reynolds certainly in these opening moments, but for sure his driving has as well. He's already up to 5th place as Max Furtwängler has to slow down due to a slowdown, presumably coming out of Tete Rouge, and that has meant a change for 5th position up here in the pro category. Side by side. Oh, and there's an Audi off the road to the left-hand side, just under the Dunlop Bridge there. Don't know what that's all about. But clearly there has been problems here in the Pro-Am field. And back to the pit lane for Kai Diel. Kurt van Hoornacker has come into the pit lane after lap 1 as well. So that's already 6 drivers out of the 36 who have had to come down pit lane after only lap 1 here, which is a sign of things going really quite badly for some on this opening lap.
Absolutely, there we go. And yeah, just watching then as we go down the back straight here. We've got all these cars nice and grouped together at the moment, in the ones that we can see in shot at least. And of course, down a great big long back straight like this one, in an endurance style race where we're going to have pit stop, of course, for refueling and other bits and pieces. Then a great big long straight like this can be a real blessing for us here, as we see the Lamborghini moves to the inside there, gets another place on the run up towards the chicane. And so that's the change for the lead in the AM cars. Potentially they go side by side though. The car on the inside, the Ferrari, they're not giving it up too easily. And in fact, yes, managed to maintain the position. Keep themselves ahead of the Lamborghini, who had a great big toe all the way down the first part of the straight. But then into the chicane there, it all then started to fall a bit apart for them. So now then, Ferrari retakes the lead as they head down towards Mulsanne. And then, of course, after that, we're going to be seeing a great deal of tight and twisty parts on the latter part of the circuit then, where it's unlikely that the Lamborghini's going to be able to have a second crack at it. But I tell you what, down they come into another chicane here, and it looks as though they're able to keep themselves in the hunt at least, but not necessarily looking too much of a threat at this stage.
Well, that was very close for Navarro de Boiva. Nearly clinched the lead away from Carl Pitt. Well, he will do now.
And he does.
He's got to slow down. He's got to slow down out of the chicane by the looks of things. I can't think of anything else it might be. You wouldn't slow down for any other reason, I guess. So it's got to be a slow down penalty, and Navarro de Boiva does finally get through, as there's also a battle here for 4th place in Pro-Am. Dean Timms right on the back of Eva van der Linden, but they might well fall into a bit of an agreement here to just help each other a little bit and try and catch the leaders in Pro-Am. But interesting lead change there in Am. Don't see that very often, but a slowdown on the exit of the second chicane for Carl Pierce, and it does show them just how hurtful it is around here to get a slowdown penalty, because momentum is so important coming onto these long straights.
It certainly is. Momentum is just the name of the game, really, in motor racing generally, I suppose you could say, because, of course, you know, if you try and go for the move, as the Lamborghini did earlier on that we were watching, trying to get by the Ferrari, and then it doesn't quite work, then suddenly you're offline. That means you're going to lose time to that car you tried to overtake. You're going to lose time to the car behind you, which then might put them into a position to then have a go at you, which then will further put you offline, and all sorts of things. So one mistake, one failed attempt can then suddenly unravel a series of corners or a whole lap for you. So what we're going to see next is a replay of Harry Watts here. As, oh dear, and the back end, well, it's perhaps, well, a bit of an easier thing to lose on a Mercedes, having all of its weight in the front end. And so there we go then. A bit of a spin turn after briefly holding up some of their rivals there. But no contact, that's the main thing between everybody there. As side by side now, you can see here, Beamer versus Lamborghini. And that BMW, whilst it does look incredibly large in comparison to the tiny little mid-engine supercar there, it has got a great deal of grunt in it and has got a good aerodynamic profile. But now, as we head down towards the next couple of corners then, will the Lamborghini think about a counter-attack? It looks like they're thinking about it, certainly, but it doesn't end up materialising in a move just yet. But it looks as though as they head through Ford and up towards the final turn then, it looks like they might just be able to have a little bit of a good run here, although no, as I say, all that was at the mid part of that cornering section. That was where things were looking much more promising for the Lamborghini, but some just poor exit, or maybe just great exit from the BMW in front, means that Archie Lanz now has the lead in AM.
Well, this is good racing between the two. Side by side through the Porsche curves is not something you see very often, but they made it work. Lands on a bit of a poor line though through the first chicane, and De Boyver will get just a little bit closer on the run down the hill now towards Tetrusian, towards the Mulsanne straight once again. Points leader Semban Ruler just sits in third place there, sits in behind and watches and waits. With Carl Pierce just behind him, he's second place in the points, and now will move maybe through inside line and Tetrusian. You don't see side by side through there very often, but they've made it work. Carl Pierce to the inside, and he does indeed get through. De Boyver right behind the BMW, and he will try and get through as well into the first chicane in much the same way that he tried to do to Carl Pierce on the last lap. Side by side for first and third, all in one shot, with Tony van der Linden closing on them all as well. It's inside line for the lead for Navarro De Boyver, who will break a little bit later and will get the lead this time, although he has to give space through the second part. Once again, contact between the two on the exit, and they will continue to run side by side. De Boyver gets through, and it looks like Lanz has got a poor run as a result of that contact.
Yeah, one of those things where you would like to believe that anything that could be explained by stupidity rather than malice is the former than the latter, but it looked as though that's either the BMW of Archie Lanz, they're just not seeing the car to their outside, or deliberately trying to crowd them out. One of the two. I would certainly hope it was the first rather than the second, but as it was then, just came straight over and made side-by-side contact there. They're still going side-by-side through the second chicane on the back straight, and then down now towards Mulsanne corner, of course. And just up ahead, the battle has evened out there between the two cars just in front. And then for Archie and van der Linden, they've got things still to play for between the pair of them as they drag race down towards the next corner. But then just behind them, you've got Pierce, who's having a think about it in that purple BMW. But now then, the Ferrari rather, up the inside, not the Lamborghini, and manages to make their way through. So van der Linden up ahead of Archie Lanz, I believe. Or no, Pierce up ahead of Lanz, I should say. Yeah,
it's Pierce who's just got through. It's pretty hard to tell. I mean, it's very, very congested in the AM field. This is more like what I was expecting, actually, from all of the classes. But it turns out it's just the AMs who are delivering us this kind of pack racing so far. Dean Timms is just in behind van der Linden. You can see in Pro-Am, but it's a lot less populated down there. It's much more in the AMs. What a dive that is from Carl Pierce, who's on a charge right now. De Boyver pushed to the outside of Indianapolis towards the gravel. He'll go down the inside at Arnage though, and Archie Lanz will maybe get a run as a result of this as well. Pierce roars around the outside of Arnage, and he will get through. Will benefit from the slipstream of the Porsche, and will now have to look over his shoulder. Meanwhile, Gus Franken and Jerome Reigns also fight side by side out of Arnage. Interesting in AM to see once again. This is fantastic racing, even within the first quarter of an hour of this one. Side by side into the Porsche curves again. Archie Lanz and Navarro De Boyver, much like they were for the race lead one lap ago. They do it again, this time for third place, but they'll single file things out before the real difficult stuff comes, and that is probably a good thing. But what fantastic racing in this AM field. The top 5 glued together pretty much by the slipstream that you get so much of around this circuit.
You do indeed, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Some big, long stretches here where that draft can really give you that benefit, that toe. And when we talk about the toe here, of course, for anybody who might be new to motor racing or to esports and that sort of thing, it's the air that the car is passing through, or specifically the car in front is passing through. It's then leaving a nice big empty space, a lot less air resistance going over your car, which then means that you can maintain a higher top speed than the car in front whilst using less fuel. Which of course then factors into some of the strategies here, where in a longer endurance race, there's up the inside into the first couple of corners they go, then up in turn 2, and now the Lamborghini then moves, or the Ferrari rather, as again I'm getting my Italian sports cars mixed up, manages to go around the outside and takes the lead of AM, just ahead of Van Ruler, but Van Ruler's not leaving this one lying just yet. The Porsche gets up the inside, tries to then hang it all the way around the outside, has to tuck back in behind for the time being, and all the while they're getting threatened by the car behind too, that being Archie Lands once more in the BMW. And as they head their way down now onto the main back straight, bit of a wave there, exactly, wonderful bit of you say that racing drivers can't multitask. It's a total lie. And as they go down the back straight, then it looks as though Ferrari's position is relatively comfortable right now, because behind them is where the action is. You've got Van Ruler, Lanz and De Bova all nice and close to one another, trying to find their position on the road here as they head into the first chicane. And in there they go then, and then they start to really even out their positions once more. And this run down to the next chicane looks like this might be where the Ferrari is under a bit more pressure from the Porsche behind.
Well, the Lamborghini and BMW side by side for third. Van Ruler and Pierce a single file, and Pierce was very pleased with himself as he came out of Tetra Rouge there as he took the lead, and why not as well. He's under pressure now though, into the second chicane, and points leader Sam Van Ruler wants even more to his name. Inside line at the second chicane, he breaks later in the Porsche, and Pierce sees it coming, and so lets him have that one for now. We'll have the exit. Well, he should have done. Certainly took the later apex through the chicane and should have got the run really towards the Mulsanne corner, but in the end couldn't quite do it. Clearly chatting as well. I don't know if he's chatting to someone within this race or whether he's chatting just to somebody else, I guess, before while he's driving right now, but certainly keeping him calm right now and keeping him in this battle. Lance just having to show signs of defending there into Mulsanne corner as De Boiver looked like he might have chanced to move. But such fantastic racing there and we haven't been able to look at the other categories too much so far. But there are battles going on here as well, like in Pro-Am. Jim Breitenbach has managed to find his way up to 10th position from the very back. And there's a bit of a train forming here as well. So it is reforming a little bit, but I think these starts have been so chaotic that the fields have been blown apart a little bit by this.
Yeah, and that's going to be interesting as we get deeper and deeper into this race, of course, because, you know, if we take a look at the times being set by the guys in AM, for example, you know, they're sort of hovering around sort of 4 minutes or so as their lap time. You then take a look at the guys in Pro, and they're, of course, down the 54s and 55s, and that's just on the last lap as well, not even just their overall best times, though it also happens to be, for most of the field, it was their best time last time around. Yeah, as it is, when we take a look at that then, 5 seconds a lap quicker, it's of course near 4 minute lap around here, so it will take a while, but eventually the pros will start to catch these guys, and then that's where things are going to get very interesting indeed for the pro drivers in particular. But as I say all that, we've been bemoaning the lack of competition up at the front for the pros. Apparently now we have John Williams right behind Chatterton by about 9/10 of a second according to my timing screens here. So could be that we're on for a good little scrap there for the lead of this race, but for the time being we're keeping an eye on this one here in AM and seeing all this great racing that's going on between these guys. You've got the Ferrari and the BMW going side by side once again here down towards the left-hander just to finish out another lap. Then space given, which is all very well and good, and then Archie just gets out the throttle slightly into the corner, and maybe the Ferrari end up travelling at 88 miles an hour because they've disappeared all of a sudden. And no, there they are off in the background. So they've gone off circuit, rejoined behind this lead group, and so that then means they've got an awful lot of work to do now to Mr. Pierce.
Yeah, Carl Pierce, and he's definitely hit the wall as well because that rear wing is not at the right angle anymore. This is the moment. Oxenant was down the inside in towards the final couple of chicanes. Oh, I don't know if there was contact or not. Ooh. That was certainly a contributing factor, and it wasn't an insignificant hit on the barriers either. So Carl Pierce has definitely been in the wall there, and it was in a big way. So Yeah, not sure if there was contact, but it was certainly contributed to the off there. And Pierce is going to be very disappointed about that, because if there's ever a circuit where you don't want damage, it's this one, because the amount of time you're going to lose on the straights as a result of damage is going to be, well, quite large now for Pierce.
It could, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you then got to consider, of course, all that damage on the car, it was, as you say, not an insignificant hit that you could see there, which leads me to think that maybe there was some contact, even if it was maybe something a bit more innocent, like netcode or something like that, that may have caused the contact, because the drivers have been racing very cleanly and very closely with one another, as we see another change in position there, as we get a new driver on the podium, that being Van der Linden. And on the podium in Am, I should say. And yeah, it's all just looking very interesting, very close. But even closer here, down in Pro Am, where we've got then Pew starting to make their way along and past another Van der Linden, or past Tim's, and now sighting another Van der Linden, I should say. And down in towards Mulsanne they go, before then powering off into the distance. So. Yeah, this has been a race with mucho battles happening all over the place here, and once again we can see it between the BMWs and the Lamborghini, as through the second chicane on the back straight they go then. Great area just to be able to pull up the brakes, try and get a move done up the inside, something like that. But as we now start to go down towards Mulsanne corner, this then is going to be where the strategy as far as the racecraft is concerned is going to need to be thought out here, because the cars look to be going 3 wide down into here. Then the Beamer really cuts off the nose of the Lamborghini, and then the other BMW, the 36 car, you can see there, tries to go around the outside. Doesn't make it happen. It's a mistake from the other BMW. The big BMW goes really deep, goes into the gravel trap, and that then frees up the Lamborghini to disappear off into the distance. Franken then getting themselves away, and Reigns falling down the order behind, or just ahead rather, of Van der Linden, who's of course fallen really far down the order.
Yeah, it was wide into Mulsanne corner, through the gravel and to the back of the group, still side by side between Gus Franken and Jerome Reigns. And we look at Reigns now, looking to make this move, or at least slot in, get single file once again in this battle for third place that is now starting to lose a bit of time to those leaders. Semper Bruder out front, Archie Lands on his own as well. They're 2 seconds apart from one another, and they're up the road from these guys as well. So as entertaining as it is, that they are losing that bit of time to the race leader about 20 minutes into this race. There's also a couple of cars spun off there in the background. So Ferrari and an Audi getting back going again. Looked like it was Jarmo Sastromoinen and Matthias de Groot as well, getting back on the road again. But we'll find out what happened down at Arnage. Here it is. This is Matthias de Groot. I don't know where the Audi's going to come into this. It could be a single car incident here for Matthias de Groot. Just on the brakes there. Gets onto that curb. Groot finds himself on the... Oh dear, that's awkward. Sastromoinen has to just negotiate the Ferrari there, but just a simple one really. On the brakes, turning while braking as well into Arnage, and unfortunately a simple spin for Matthias de Groot.
Unfortunately, I tell you what then, as we watch on board with Jerome Reigns here, you can tell that they don't live in London. That's an awful lot of empty real estate in their room there. They can afford it, clearly. But there we are then. So down the start-finish straight they go once again. And they've got that BMW there nice and planted underneath them. They've got 2 Lamborghinis ahead of them now, in the form of De Bova and then Franken as well. And so that then means that they're able to get themselves just back onto the back and get that rhythm that they found earlier on and try and make something happen. But one driver trying to make something happen is Pew at the moment, still in this fight here with Timms and Van der Linden as they head down the back straight then into one of the chicanes. No adventurous diving or anything like that going on down into there. And it's always a little bit misleading sometimes with GT3 cars when you look at the sort of front-on looking shots, because they tend to look an awful lot closer than they actually are. And then you see a side-on shot and you say, oh no, there's about 5 car lengths between them. So as they go down the way here then to the next chicane, we've got then these guys still just absolutely nose to tail with one another, separated by only a couple of tenths each. But even then, a couple of tenths for the amount of speed that they're carrying down this straight, that's not close enough to be even nose to tail alongside. Never mind getting wheels alongside one another. So through the chicane they go then, and it looks as though the BMW were on board with there. The one being driven by Thomas Pugh gets a bit of a better exit out there than the one ahead. That one being driven by Van der Linden. You can see that reflected in terms of the gap, not just to Van der Linden in front, but also to Timms behind, and how that has then reduced and extended as appropriate. And now to the inside, alongside then, and now just ahead by a whisker, by a nose, ahead of the other BMW, and Pugh manages to get that one up the inside. Good bit of racing from them there, just to keep it stuck in, keep the faith that they're going to have the space and the respect from the other guy alongside, and into the corner they go then. Another place gained.
That was all very clean and all very courteous as well, I guess, for everybody. It's a bit of a train forming there. 4th place. Got Timothy Vanderbroek not too far in front, then Chris Thacker and Lewis Boubier, who are currently the leaders right now, but there's a bit of lifting off. Ivo van der Linden. And just under 25 minutes into this race, that's going to become a bit of a talking point. Coming up to a third of the way through here, and if you are going to split this race into thirds, then you're probably going to want to go one lap longer and then maybe make a pit stop. We'll see just how close they can get, though, to that halfway mark in this one, which will come at 37.5 minutes in, which is not easy to do the maths on, really, because my 37.5 times table is not fantastic, but it's an important number and an important lap. We'll see when we get there. The leading battle is looking a lot more interesting, though, here. Chris Chelton has held the lead for quite some time now, although John Williams is catching up. And so we might all see a leading battle overall here for the very first time, and a rare glimpse of some of the Mercedes in this field as well, because we don't have many other than those in the pro category. Chatterton going to be feeling the pressure here, and certainly the slipstream at Le Mans playing its role once again. John Williams is going to be feeling the full effects of that right now, and he's going to be a great deal closer than he is right now when they get to Mulsanne corner, for example.
Certainly will be, yeah. Very, very close indeed. It's not too dissimilar really to the back straight at the Nürburgring. Not quite as long, of course, with it being punctuated by those 2 chicanes in the middle, but in the same sense you can go from around about sort of 6, 7 tenths back here at the start of this straight, and then you navigate the 2 chicanes in the middle, and then by the time you get down to Mulsanne you can be in a position to actually then go for the move. Now, of course, it depends on how well you take those chicanes, how well the driver in front or behind does as well, depending on whether you're attacking and defending, of course. And so as you then end up finding your way down the back straight here, down towards the next corner, you can see then this time has actually opened up between Williams and Chatterton, and now gone from about 5.5 tenths as they were entering the first chicane to now 7.5 tenths on the run down towards the next corner. So that will have given Chatterton just a little bit of a reprieve, just a little bit more space to keep on operating and make sure that they keep themselves in a good frame of mind. And then we focus now back towards the beginning of that straight we've just gone down, because here in Pro-Am we've got a good scrap going on here. 5 cars all nice and closely tucked together as they make their way down the back straight here, then all the way towards that first chicane. And is there going to be a potential dive up the inside? Looks like there will be for the 4th car in this train here, up the inside, and even get 2 of them. There you go, that's a move. 2 cars in one braking zone, and not only that, but then completely unchallenged through the rest of the chicane. Not alongside, not having to give anyone space, can take the line that they want, and so then that's a great move there from that particular BMW.
Yeah, Dean Timms it was, who moves up to 4th place. I think there was a lot of games going on there, really. Thomas Pugh was leading the line and maybe just lifting off on the way in towards the first chicane. They were certainly lifting off from Vanderbroek and van der Linden just behind, because they were going almost nowhere. Dean Timms pulled alongside them as if he was in a different category of car, really. It was quite remarkable. He goes through, though, up to 4th place, and the battles will continue. So out of the second chicane they'll go now, and well, all the while, they do continue, unfortunately, to lose time to those further out in front. You can see some of them go through shot there. That's the 8th and 9th placed overall cars. Lewis Boubier and Chris Thacker only separated by 1.7 seconds at the moment. And then we've got that 6-second gap back to these guys and this train here. Didier de Vlaeminck has already made his first pit stop of the day, but it's a long one, I'm afraid, and so and it was quite some time ago as well, so unfortunately we can add him to the list of those who have already been in. We've seen some very, very long pit stops for the likes of Kai Diel and Stuart Reines, who are into the pit lane all over again. Max Furtwängler and also Lucas Romano are already retired from this race, unfortunately, from the pro field. So only 7 of the pros are actually still running in a good position, having not pitted as of yet, which is a shame to see. But there's still, oh, here we go, long way to go. Into the pit lane then. We're only just into the second third of this race, but it looks like this might be the limit as to what they can actually do. 7 laps around here at Le Mans, and most of the guys at the front anyway are in the pit lane.
Yeah, a bit of an odd one. I mean, it's sort of one of these things where you sort of look at the clock and you think to yourself, 27 minutes? Surely that's not enough time for us to have had our first stint. Usually in so many different iRacing races, you'll end up seeing 30, 40, 45, maybe even 50 minutes, even an hour sometimes before the first end up going through there. But one thing is that they could potentially have increased fuel usage as well. Of course, they could end up having that coming into play to try and make things a bit more interesting. But the thing that's very interesting indeed is the fact that, of course, all of the pro drivers are into the pits, I should say. Nobody is elected to go one lap longer. As big mistake there, very, very deep there from Dubova, and so they then end up moving over and allowing Reigns through, or Franken, I should say. That was who's gotten by. Or is that Dubova? Yeah. No, I don't know. But one of the Lamborghinis, as it is, they make their way over there with a bit of a mistake, allows then the BMW through. But yeah, in terms of that, then of course, yeah, if you want to try and extend your stint, as Timothy van der Broek has done, then that can potentially net you some really fantastic benefits in a series where there is in-race refueling. Because, of course, with the tyre construction and things like that in this type of category, and particularly for only about 30 minutes, 25, 30 minutes worth of racing, they're not going to have worn down all that much. You're going to have very good tyres still. It's not like, say, Formula 1 or a sprint format where the tyres tend to start to degrade relatively quickly and things like that. No, instead, and we'll see a replay briefly here as well, as to what happened just a moment ago between one of the Ferraris and one of the BMWs. So into the last couple of corners they go then, outbraking themselves, and then just side-by-side contact, both cars going around there. Van der Linde coming off the worst for wear of the two of them, both going into a bit of a slide there, and Van der Linde not able to catch it quite as well as the other car. But yes, as I say, if you're able to then go that little bit longer, that means you've then got a lighter car compared to the rest of the field. You're able to therefore set better lap times, and so as opposed to those sprint formats where you've got all the fuel on board at the start of the race, you've got those tyres that degrade quickly, it's not the undercut that's more effective in this sort of endurance racing, but instead the overcut.
And that's what Timothy van der Broek is trying to do right now. Marcel Breitenbach and also Mark Fleming has stayed out here as well. Nobody else has gone further than 7 laps here. And those 3 do have enough fuel to go to the end of the next lap at least, because running out of fuel around here is going to be no laughing matter for anybody. Half an hour in then here at Le Mans, and the first of the pit stops has been made. By the way, they don't have increased fuel usage, but they do have a 60% limit on the fuel tank. So that's what's limiting them to only 7 laps. However, I still agree that that's really short, stint-wise, because normally you'd see a GT3 with a 100% tank limit make an hour, maybe a little bit less around Le Mans, but you're trying to see them make an hour, and 60% of an hour is not 27 minutes. I don't know what it is, so don't test me. What is it, 36? 40? Something along those lines. It's certainly not 27 minutes, so it's an interesting one to note, and we'll keep an eye on it as the race unfolds. John Williams, though, is not hanging about here. He's going through on the inside line in towards Indianapolis, and Chris Chatterton didn't seem too disappointed about it. The 2 Mercedes exchanging the lead there in Pro, and neither of them fighting very hard over it at all.
Not at all there, no, not really. Looked a bit more of a formality than anything else, to be honest. But Indianapolis, one of those great corners on this circuit. It's got that banking, it's got that flow to it, where it's then leads, of course, then round down into Arnage, and it's just a great sequence of corners. Good bit of tarmac to be watching on board there with. But even more great piece of tarmac is the one that we're watching now, where we've got 3-4 cars side by side down towards the first chicane on the back straight. And then you can see there the Ferrari slightly compromised in its line there versus the cars behind. So the Audi is then there, and then Ferrari's round. The Ferrari's round, hit the wall, and they hit it twice for good measure too. And then all of a sudden they disappeared and gone to the pit lane. So is that race over for Pierce? I suspect it might be.
It's certainly back to the pit lane, and I don't know, well, he's going to have to go back out there again to complete enough laps to get points, and I wonder if that might be in his mind if he rejoins again. Let's see. However, well, not a lot he can do about that, unfortunately. We've also seen Marcel Breitenbach back to pit lane here. I wonder if he's run out of fuel here, because I don't know if there's been an incident. There could be something elsewhere at play there, but Marcel Breitenbach was one of those who hasn't been into the pit lane yet and just had to escape during the final part of the lap there, which is not a good sign fuel-wise. This could be our answer, though. It is fuel. He's coasting down the straight towards the Porsche curves. It's always, good to try and push it as far as possible, but you can't push it over the limit. If you run out of fuel at Le Mans, there's no way you're making it back to pit lane.
No, absolutely not. And of course, Toyota learned that much to their dismay a few years ago. And and since then they've gotten it right a few times. So there we are then. We now take a look up at the Pro class, and in particular to Taylor Lane, wearing the proprietary colours of McLaren there, so I'm in all support of that as an unashamed McLaren fan. If anybody was running McLaren in this particular field, I would be backing them to win. Taylor apparently has gone for the Mercedes instead, so he can, or the BMW I should say, so he can be forgiven, slightly, maybe. I don't know. BMWs are a bit of a sore spot for me. It's one of those things. But yeah, as they head down the back straight right now then, we've got a bit of a gap up towards Shadton and Williams up at the front, of course, 4.5 seconds, there or thereabouts. But right behind them is Dilworth, of course. And Dilworth then, Jason Dilworth, is just having a bit of a look at the moment, not really going for the move up the inside, anything along those lines, but they are carrying a good deal of speed through there. Have been able to hit the second part of that chicane much better than Taylor. And now then, as they go onto the back straight, this then is something that you will see an awful lot in sim racing and endurance racing, and these series where you have this in-race refueling, and that is the bump draft. The bump draft is a wonderful thing, provided you don't bump them a bit too much. Then it's a bit more of a hit draft, really, and usually followed by a hit spin. So there we are then, the bump draft there. It's very similar to the draft, the tow, the slipstream, all these things, all these terms that mean the same thing that we've been talking about earlier on, where you get then reduced aerodynamic buffeting against the car, less air resistance, and so therefore you can reach a higher speed. But not only that, you use a huge amount less fuel. And so as a result then both cars get benefit, because of course the car in front is then being pushed along, so its engine doesn't have to work quite as hard to push that air out of the way, and the car behind doesn't have to work nearly as hard to be able to achieve those speeds. So it's much more of a benefit if you're the second car, and it looks as though perhaps Dilworth is having a think about making sure they're not the second car anymore, as they had a little look around the outside, but ultimately nothing coming of it this time. But there we are then, bump draft in operation then, and of course the great thing about that is it's going to then slowly drive these guys up towards Jadson and Williams at the front there. That gap was 4.5 seconds, is now 4.2 seconds, I say that, it then goes up to 4.3 seconds, typical.
It will generally bounce around, I would imagine. There's going to be a bit of chasing going on here though. Dilworth definitely wanting to get Taylor Lane a bit closer and get the two of them a bit closer to those two leaders and see whether they can fight over the race win in the not too distant future. We're not far away from half distance in this race either. Looks like it's going to be 20 laps here today. We're coming up towards the end of lap 9 right now in this one. Mark Fleming, by the way, on this lap has been into the wall somewhere, at least off the road. He's returned back to pit lane and could be out of the race. It's not looking too good for Carl Pearce either, who I suspect might well be out of the race as well in this one, but we'll wait and find out a little bit later on. We've seen long pit stops as well for Chris Thacker and Didier de Vlaminck in the Pro-Am field. Both of the Vlaminck's pit stop was 50 seconds, with Chris Thacker over a minute's worth of a pit stop there, despite running in second place in the Pro-Am standings at the time. It's given Lewis Bouvier quite some lead. This is what happened to Mark Fleming. Oh my word! Whoa. That is quite spectacular. And now we have our answers as to why he's down pit lane again.
Absolutely, yeah, that's not a brilliant crash, I'll be honest. Well, certainly not brilliant from inside the car, and I tell you what, if the car was jumping about that much with a VR headset on, I don't think that a hurt neck would be the thing top of your priority list, really. It's something more to do with nauseousness, probably. But as we head down the back straight, once again then taking a look at this fight that's going on in Am at the moment, between 5th and 6th there. Sastamainen trying to make their way by Debova at the moment, and things pretty close between these two. Have been for the majority of the race, in fact, with Debova making their way forwards and backwards here and there. Franken just up in front, of course, was the car that we saw battling earlier on with the BMW, and then going into the gravel trap, allowing the BMW through there. And then as we take a look at this one, yeah, Debova's been sort of a bit forward and back, really. I think this more down to the pit stops than anything else in terms of how they've ended up falling so much further back relative to those cars they had been fighting with previously, and certainly they were ahead of the Lamborghini in front of them before. So as we head through the next few corners, then through Indianapolis, down towards Arnage, we're going to see these guys still absolutely nose to tail, separated by less than half a second. It's the wonderful thing, really, when it comes to closed wheel cars. They do produce an awful lot less in the way of aerodynamic disturbances and outwash, inwash, all these other various vortex generating activities you see with open wheel race cars. And so as a result, they can follow along in these much tighter gaps that we see here. And then of course a great deal of balance of play going on as well to try and make these cars that closer to each other in speed too. Now in terms of this gap that we can see here, Taylor now about 4 seconds off the back of Chatterton, just in front, so that gap has continued to drop down. I'd imagine in no small part due to the fact that they are getting this bump draft from Dilworth at the moment. So as they make their way down the back straight then here the lifting off of the Mercedes we're on board with there, that then sees the BMW then launch ahead of us briefly before we then get into the braking zone, and then things stay relatively close from that point onwards. So at this point, Dilworth then a bit more in the driving seat, you would have to say, pardon the pun, but as they make their way down towards the next few corners then, it's going to be once more just trying to gain that time as best they can on those top two in front, because by fighting with Taylor and getting themselves into a bit of a flap at the moment, then they might end up seeing themselves having the spotted bother and losing more time than that which they would stand to gain if they were then ahead and in clean air. Because right now, of course, they can just continue to save fuel, and that will then allow them that opportunity to go racing on for an extra lap at the next stops and try and get the extra added benefits that come as a result of that.
Well, yeah, it's not even just going a lap longer, of course. It's just shortening your final pit stop if possible. Even if you can't go a lap longer, which is quite difficult around here at Le Mans, been over 13 kilometres around here, it's difficult to save that amount of fuel in a stint as long as this. But uncommonly, in the Prestana Nomad livery here today, that's not always the case for him. But that's the bright blue you can see in the background there. Currently third in the point standings, with John Williams currently second in the points. Stuart Reynolds, championship leader, in 5th place at the moment. So it's all going to close up once again. And I guess the good thing we've experienced through the first half of this season is that there's been no dominant character in particular. And it's pretty wide open, as we can see from this race.
Absolutely, yeah. It looks as though we've got, a nice tight field spread for the most part. These guys currently battling over third position, just behind the ones that we see on screen, of course, that we've had a look at a few times. They seem to be on relatively similar pace. And if we take a look in terms of the lap times, of course, they're there or thereabouts. Certainly the last time around, both of those cars in third and fourth were quicker than the race leader, but they were just that little bit slower than Chatterton. So Chatterton then is gaining some of that benefit that we're seeing for Dilworth as well. And as we then take a look to these guys rushing down the back straight once more, then we've got Dabova in the shot there, then just ahead of the Audi R8 as we've seen before, but then just ahead of them, of course, we've got Reigns and Franken. Franken in the Lamborghini, the bright orange one, you can see them making their way down up the inside, and up the inside they go on the BMW down in towards Indianapolis, then side by side as they head through there into the second half of the corner then, and once again it looks close, side by side, but now down in towards the right-hander here. We're going to then see through Arnage, the Lamborghini get in front, and then start to power off into the distance. The wonderful soundtrack to it. Oh, there it is.
And there you go, right on cue, on board with the Lamborghini. I have to say that even in real life, it's even better, by the way. I was only listening to and viewing one on Monday. So there you are. It's absolutely fantastic to listen to in real life. Even more fantastic than in RAC, which does a pretty good job with it, to be fair. Through the Porsche curves they go, and there may have even been a scrape on the wall for Gus Franken there. Through that newly tightened section. Hasn't always been like that at that left-hander, but they brought the wall closer, and now Gus Franken's gone wide through Corvette, allowing your own range back through all over again. And so this battle will to and fro once more, and now it's doubled in size as well, as it's a 4-car train onto the next lap.
Absolutely. Now, I've been doing some mental maths here, Ewan, and with them having, the majority of the field that is, having done their first stop on around about sort of 25 minutes in, it means that fuel might be just a bit marginal towards the end of this one, because of course we'll have 25 minutes, then we would assume about 50 minutes will be when they come into the pits next time, as we see one Lamborghini pass another then relatively easily up through Dunlop Curve, and then up towards the chicanes, of course, at the beginning of the lap. And as we then see them get blasted by the Audi as well, I suspect that those sparks we saw then on the wall from the rear view camera may well have been a bit more hefty contact than that which we may have thought at the time. But yes, in terms of all that then means that if we get another 25 minutes after 50, that's going to be an hour and 15 minutes. And that's exactly how long the race is. It's almost as though this has been planned. So we'll wait and see then whether or not that will then result in any splashes and dashes, or whether that will mean that then the likes of those like Timothy van der Broek in Pro-Am, for example, currently 5th place by about 4 seconds off the back of the car in front. But if the car in front, so all the cars in front of them have to then come in for that splash and dash, whereas they can then just, because they've saved that extra lap's worth of fuel in the earlier stop, be able to then just keep themselves pushing on, then, well, that could end up seeing them be a dark horse for the race win here, potentially in Pro-Am. And we'll have to wait and see, of course, as how that then reflects out in Pro as well.
We definitely will. I'm not sure. It's hard in these races that don't have a specific amount of laps pinned upon them, because it does make these calculations a little bit more difficult. I think this race will run to 20 laps. If they're running 7 laps per stint, then they could theoretically do 3:20, or they could do 21 laps on 3 tanks of fuel. And that would leave them a lap to spare and whatever, and that's a calculation they'll have to do. But it's all depends on a lot of factors, really. Let's take a look at a little replay about what's been happening further down. Jeremy de Boyver into the first chicane here. It's going to be on power for the Lamborghini.
Oh dear.
And goes around and very nearly into the wall. May have even touched it. Can't tell from this angle, but it just shows that even with traction control that these GT3s have, it doesn't save you from everything. And it's, oh dear, we're about to see something terrible here, I think. Oh no!
Oh dear! Oh, there we go then.
Well, I was wondering what a producer there telling us to keep watching. I was like, for what? That's what it was for. There you are.
Absolutely.
But there we are. It just shows that everybody's told when you start racing, look where you're going when you're re-entering the circuit, and that's exactly why.
Yeah, I mean, there's also something to be said for the manner in which they rejoined as well. I mean, you look at that there, they come back onto the circuit and sort of, all right, well, fair enough, you've been able to rejoin there's plenty of space, but then they drift all the way across the width of the track back to the standard racing line. And I'm sorry, but, you can't do that. If you are at a significantly lower speed, you've been off of the circuit, you've got to stay offline until you're back up to full racing speed, and that they certainly were not, which is why, of course, that car was then caught out of it. Caught a little bit short by then the sudden appearance of a car drifting its way across onto the racing line as they were powering out the chicane.
Yeah, absolutely. The angle, as you say, very important when you're rejoining, and make sure it's not too sharp of an angle in front of somebody. But anyway, I think everybody got away with it, most of all, and that's the important thing. Taylor Lane and Jason Dilworth still working together here, working as teammates almost, but Chris Chatterton and John Williams are doing pretty much the same for 1 and 2 as well, so it's very, very difficult to catch them right now. It's all well and good doing this, but if you've got 2 drivers in front of you doing the exact same, then there's just not a lot you can do. There is Dilworth pushing Taylor Lane once again on his debut here this season, but just can't do a whole lot right now, and I do wonder at what point these 2 are going to give up on that and start fighting between themselves for 3rd place.
Yeah, it is an interesting thing. I think, like I say, it's sort of when you're in that sort of first and last stint, that's really where the racing tends to end up happening in endurance racing. And so I would wager then for the rest of this stint, it might well be that Dilworth just sits in behind Taylor Lane here and just decides, you know what, I'm going to keep on saving the fuel, I'm going to keep on saving the tyres, saving the engine, all these various things by just sticking in behind you, doing the bump draft, and then as and when Taylor ends up coming to the pits, it might be that Dilworth follows them in which case if they do, they'll have a shorter stop, as you rightly pointed out earlier on, when they refuel the tanks. But equally, for the amount of time they've been behind, the amount of bump drafting that's been going on there, I would not be surprised to see Dilworth then going that little bit longer there, 1 lap extra, possibly, and then making it way round, getting themselves into the pits, getting themselves freshly fueled, and away they go, and then having gained maybe a couple of seconds in the act of doing so, and then really start to try and put the lobby down. Put the lobby down, put the foot down, rather. I've read something that said lobby there, and these words, they're difficult today.
Multitasking as well. It's hard. Jim Breitenbach makes his way through into 6th place, by the way. That's Francois Perdra, you can see in the bottom right hand side of your screen, and it's been great to catch up with these drivers in real life as well throughout the evening so far. It's a new addition for season 5 of this championship that we've been able to take a look in at what these drivers are doing and just how they're reacting to these things. We saw with Carl Pearce, who was celebrating his move for the lead a little bit earlier on, and why not as well. in the battle that we were seeing in AM earlier. This is in Pro-Am though, and this is Jim Brayton-Mack getting his way up to 6th place from the very back of the field. Couldn't get a lap in during qualifying, but is now into 6th place. Side by side in the AMs again between Gus Franken and Jarmo Sastamoinen. Particularly impressive from Sastamoinen so far. He started from the pit lane earlier on, and not sure why, if I'm honest with you, but he is nearly up into the top 5 now. Franken has the inside line into Mulsanne corner and will hold on to that place for the moment. But a better exit from Sastamoinen here should have the position. He'll be in the slipstream, and well, will he push the Lamborghini or will he try and go through instead? Well, it looks like he's going to be pushing there. Oh no, there is going to be a move instead from the Audi. Exactly the same engine in these two cars, by the way, and that's why you can hear pretty much the same noise from the different bodies. But it's outside line in towards Indianapolis for Sastamoinen, and one of the only Audis in the field. It's not going to be able to get through on this occasion. Into our notch for some further up. This is Navarro de Boiver and Jeroen Reins, and out front as well in AM we've got Sam Van Ruler and Archie Lands. Fastest lap overall, by the way, set just now by Dean Timms, who's recently into 2nd place in the Pro-Am field, but at nearly 10 seconds from Louis Boubier. It doesn't look like that gap is going to close before the end of this race. Side by side again between Franken and Sastamoinen though, and the Audi once again can't get through. I think showing the effects a little bit of having maybe a little bit too much downforce on that car here this evening.
Possibly a little bit too much. I mean, it's one of these things where we've been seeing the Audi just looking so pliant in the corners. As you say, it might then be down to a downforce thing. Might be down to the Lamborghini maybe going a little bit too far the other way and really prioritizing straight line speed, because with this particular Lamborghini we have seen, of course, they're the ones that went into the gravel trap earlier on, going a bit too deep on the brakes. They have looked a little bit skittish and a bit slidey underneath them, so could be that this Lamborghini is set up with a big bias towards straight line speed. Maybe with then the Audi it's a bit more geared towards cornering, and then as a result, because they're at two ends of the spectrum, it just then further exasperates that difference in terms of the performance and where the performance lies ultimately for these cars at the moment. So as they head up through Dunlop Curve and up towards the chicane then, it looks as though the move is maybe on there. There was certainly a look up the inside from the Audi there. Looked like a good commitment. And now that on exit, they're going to try and pull side by side here with the Lamborghini. Try and swoop around the outside, then up the inside into the corner. Doesn't end up working. The Lamborghini cuts the nose off there. And now then, they're going to have to try and carry as much speed as they can through the chicane out onto the back straight.
It was all very close. And once again, Sastamoinen just finding this difficult. The Audi maybe with a bit too much downforce on. Maybe the Audi's just not that fast in a straight line. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. But I think it's going to struggle again. Sastamoinen full in the face of slipstream right now. Franken probably won't even have to pull to the inside line here at the first chicane. We'll see if he does anyway. He pulls to the middle of the road at least. This public road, of course, that it is usually. Sastamoinen gets close, he pulls out and now will hit the wall of air, and once again he will struggle, so just needs to have a good run through some of these sections with a few more corners in really, rather than down the long Mulsanne straight.
Absolutely, yeah, and so it's going to be a case of then damage limitation all the way through this part of the circuit where it really suits the Lamborghini. But as we then take a look a little bit further up the road, we're then seeing an inverse of this battle at the moment, with Reins in that BMW that we've seen all day long, trying to go on past the Lamborghini. I think that is a De Boever, and De Boever says no thank you, I'm going to go all back all around the outside of you in the chicane. But then the mistake is made, and then that opens the door for Reins, who's then able to just power their way on past and now make their way down to Mulsanne corner with no real stresses whatsoever, unless of course the Lamborghini ends up trying to go for the full send up the inside down here into the right hander. And you can see here up at the lead then that we've had another change of position. So Williams then managing to get back ahead of Chatterton, if I've heard my producer properly there. But yeah, it's a battle that is still going on here. Sorry, fight for AM rather. So lead of the AM class then. So we've got Lands versus Van Ruler, and these guys then have had a small change of position then, but the Porsche looks nice and racy, and so they're going to try and follow on through as best they can, taking a bit more of a shallow line into the left-hander at the second part of Indianapolis there. But now this is the opportunity that the Audi has been waiting for, although that being said then, with how long the straight is all the way down towards the next corner. It looks that the Lamborghini start to pull back ahead again. It has in fact pulled back ahead now. And so now then, will Franken just be able to hold on? Yes, they do. And they get back ahead of Sastamoinen, who will be infuriated with that.
It has got to be so frustrating to be in the position that Jarmo Sastamoinen is in right now. Once again, Gus Franken just lets it go on the straight, and nothing that Sastamoinen could have done. Got a good run out of Mulsanne corner, got in front, but you just can't hold someone back on straights quite like these. John Williams and Chris Chatterton, he's still 1 and 2 right now. You can see Williams leading into the second Mulsanne chicane. We'll see at this next pit stop phase just how much fuel that Chris Chatterton has been saving. We've already had Jason Dilworth in for his second and final pit stop of the day. That's all complete now. He'll be able to go to the end. These two will be in at the end of this lap, as will everybody else who doesn't pit on the last one. And then there'll be the changes maybe. Side by side through the Porsche curves. And this time Jarmo Sastamoinen is through again. Now, are either of them going to pit here? Is Gus Franken going to cut his losses and decide to come in a lap early? Or is he going to decide to come back at him? He nearly did, even into the final chicane. But this is what Sastamoinen needed to do. Get in front where you've got a few corners to stretch out your margin. And hopefully it's enough to keep the Lamborghini behind.
I have a funny feeling it's going to be something of a losing battle here for Sastamoinen. I mean, they've got that gap now to about 0.4 of a second there, but realistically what they need is that move to happen even earlier in the track, really. So just as you get to Mulsanne curve, really, and then use all of those corners at the back end of the circuit to try and pull that gap out as high as they possibly can, because right now that gap is about 0.6 of a second with the straight line speed advantage we've seen for Franken over the course of this one. I would not be surprised at all to see them back by even by the first chicane if they go back onto the back straight with a gap of only 0.6 between them. As it is, then onto the back straight we go then with Reigns and Debova, as they are separated by just 0.4 of a second. And this seems a bit of a similar sort of situation going on here, with Debova having a good bit of straight line speed and Reigns just struggling a little bit more. Maybe not quite as much. It has been easier for Reigns to get into position to try and mount an overtaking maneuver, but certainly some shades of what we're seeing in the battle behind, as we see then a little bit of jockeying for position between the pair of them, not quite deciding where they wanted to be until a bit later down the straight there, but eventually they make it to the chicane and then make their way through. No dramas this time.
Yeah, not this time, thankfully. All good. And Sastamoinen has been able to stay in front into the first chicane this time as well. Now Chatterton comes in, John Williams comes in, but Chatterton doesn't. Having followed Williams through the entirety of this stint, he's able to go a lap further, and maybe it will result in a shorter pit stop that could win him this race. Well, less than 20 minutes to go, and it is crunch time now for the leaders. We will see just how long this stop is for John Williams. It's going to be very, very important. Just for reference, Jason Dilworth spent 19 seconds down pit lane. He won't be able to get through on Williams, you wouldn't imagine, without some sort of miracle. But the all eyes are going to be on Chatterton as well in about 4 minutes' time, because these lengths of time you spend in the pit lane is going to be very, very important.
It certainly is, absolutely, and it's one of these things where Chatterton then, having sat behind Williams all stint long, a bit like what we saw with Dilworth. I was surprised to see Dilworth in quite so early, and then it makes sense that they've then gone for a bit of a shorter stop in a sense, but realistically it just means then for that final stint we're going to end up seeing a heavier car for them. And Harry Wills then just losing the back end there, getting onto the grass with those with the rear right tyre there, and then just managing to apply the brakes and get it stopped before they went into the wall. But yeah, Dilworth then, they cross the line, start another lap here, and we can see then that they're still behind Taylor Lane by 6.7 seconds after Lane has now served their stop as well. And Chatterton then, they're going to be the real interesting ones here, because if they can take it nice and deep into this stint, and we'll wait for a timing update here to see how things are going, but yeah, 0.8 of a second is the difference there as well. So it's so there we go then between Lane and Dilworth. So 0.8 there. So realistically, Dilworth's undercut there has not worked as they would have intended. I think it does ultimately come back down to this idea that, of course, you're going to be running a heavier car out of the pits, and the difference in tyre grip between a new set and a set that's been going for about 25-30 minutes is not enormous in this category of racing. And so I think that Chatterton is the one who's got the right strategy here, going for that overcut, having sat in the slipstream and getting all that fuel saving done for lap after lap after lap. They'll go into the pits for around about a similar sort of time, I would wager, as the others, but they will then get that benefit of having run much faster. To give you some idea of just how much faster, well, they set the fastest lap of the race the last time they crossed the beam. So as a result then, there is clearly an awful lot of pace still in that car currently at the head of the field.
Well, despite the 11-second gap now between Taylor Lane and John Williams, Dilworth clearly has not quite given up on catching them. He did briefly bump draft, but now goes alongside. Probably the smarter thing to do, because this is going to be an all-out fight right to the end between these two now. Side by side into the second chicane they'll go, and it's Dilworth who gets through on Taylor Lane, although the slipstream will immediately reverse its effect, and there'll be a battle the other way this time. That is the view of Taylor Lane right now, the race winner. Last time we took on one of these longer endurance round at the Nürburgring Nordschleife circuit. It was Taylor Lane who managed to win from Lars de Verne on that day. It was second, and Janus Traub as well inside the top three. It looks like Taylor Lane is the only one of those three looking to repeat an endurance race podium here, with the other two nowhere to be seen. Out of the Mulsanne corner they will go then, and Lane will have just over 15 minutes to respond. It's either going to be 4 or 5 laps, maybe even only, I think possibly closer to only 4 laps to respond here at the end of this one. So it looks like it's going to be a 19-lap race after all, and they're absolutely fine in terms of making it on 2 stops. But the real crunch point is coming. Chris Chatterton is about to make his way down pit lane from the race lead.
They certainly are, unless, of course, they decide that they're going to try another lap extending this stint. I don't imagine that's going to be possible, but you never know. Occasionally pigs have flown, I suppose, in the past, so we'll wait and see. But watching this battle at the moment, then you can see that if they continue to fight one another... Oh, Francois! Ending up in the barriers there. I think there may have been side-to-side contact just as the cameras changed. And so that's a big shame then for the Frenchman, as they then rejoin the circuit down in P7. 6.5 seconds now off the back of the car ahead.
Yeah, mate. Well, there he is. Doesn't look too frustrated, does it? It's a real... well, yeah, there we are. An exchange of positions between two. It really is a show of just how experienced and professional these guys are when you're not fazed by these kind of things. Because your average driver certainly would be. So there you are. Chris Chatterton down pit lane right now. And that is from the overall race lead. The battle between Frank and Sestamoinen fails to go away. I think they've both made their final pit stop as well, by the way. They have indeed. And so their battle will continue on further. This is Chris Chatterton, though. And where's John Williams as he comes out the pit lane? It's only a 15-second stop for the both of them. They've taken shorter stops than most of their rivals. Chatterton retakes the lead here after coming in before this. They were nose to tail with Chatterton behind and Williams in front. It's reversed now, but the slipstream will very much still be in effect, and with 4 laps to go, including this one, this is the fight for the race win, and this is the gap that there is.
Certainly is, yeah. This will be an exciting and interesting one to the end, really, because you mentioned it there, but they had a pit stationary time of only 0.3 difference between them. So very similar amounts of fuel going in there. And so as a result, you would have to say that realistically, even though they are currently ahead right now, Chatterton, I would say, is in the better position of the two, because if they've been able to fuel up for the same amount of fuel but have gone a lap longer, then they don't need to do nearly as much fuel saving to get to the end of this one. They can drive a bit more flat out compared to John Williams, and gives them a bit more in the way of latitude and strategy here versus the car behind.
Well, this is very interesting now, and by far not by far, but it is the closest leading battle we have. Only 2 seconds in hand right now, but Archie Lands might well have the measure of Sam Van Ruler here in the final 15 minutes. Chris Chatterton certainly got his work cut out here against John Williams. The two of them are going to be fighting for very high stakes right now. If Chatterton were to finish ahead of John Williams, they'd be pretty much tied on points going into the next round, with them both overtaking Stuart Reynolds. So it would be a very important one in what is a very close championship out of the opening 3 rounds, of which this is round 4, of course. This is Harry Wills again, and bounces over the curbs. Tetra Rouge! Oh my good lord! That's quite an accident, and that's the end of the day for Harry Wills, I'm afraid. That's probably the biggest of the crashes we've seen today, and there have been a few.
Yeah, when you start seeing wheels getting detached and things like that, that's probably a terminal one, if I'm being honest. I mean, you could always give it a go. I've seen something driving around the local area that's been in a similar crash like that, but I'm not necessarily certain that one should be on the roads, much less that should be on the racing circuit.
Absolutely. Dear me. A shame for Harry Wills, who's having a difficult season, unfortunately. 9th place in the points at the moment. But pole sitter today, of course, in Pro. And so he'll be disappointed with his afternoon, I think. And he'll dust himself down and continue to do what he does. He'll be back next week. I've got no doubts about that. But a real shame to see for him. Out of Arnage for the 2 leaders then. 12 minutes, just less than 12 minutes to go in this one. And we do have 3 laps remaining at the line. It will be 3 laps because of the 2 pit stops. We won't have 20 laps, it will be only 19 here today. 31 of the 36 drivers look like they're going to be scoring points out of this one as well. Let's not forget you need to complete 50% or more of the race distance to be eligible to score points here this afternoon. So Mark Fleming, Carl Pearce, Kai Diel, Max Furtwängler and Lucas Romano all will be ineligible to receive any points from this round, unfortunately. But hopefully they will be back next week at Zolder when we return to sprint racing once again here same time, same place next week. Into the final couple of corners they will go though. It's Chatterton versus Williams, and with just over 10 minutes to go, I really don't know which way this one's going to go.
Well, it certainly suddenly swung towards Williams there with that exit from the final turn from Chatterton. Big slide that they had in terms of oversteer there. And that gap then from over half a second now down at just a 10th of a second between the two of them. As we then see this move here for 3rd place in AM. Before then we cut back to that action at the top of the Pro class. And then you can see that Chatterton's car suddenly has a bit more of a wiggle on. It's got a bit more of a shift to try and get this gap opened up again, because they are now aware that they're in a very vulnerable position after that slide out the final turn. The gap has now been able to stabilize a bit more and get up to 3.5 tenths, you can see just there, but that's still a bit of a far cry from where they were at previously, where they were sort of straddling between 6.5 and 7 tenths of a second. So that's not quite as competitive, but this is competitive here. Reigns versus De Boer as the pair of them go down in towards Mulsanne corner then. And then the Lamborghini with the inside line gets ahead, but then has a big slide themselves. That's going to open the door for Reigns to come on back past again. And no such slides or oversteer for them. And there you go, then Reigns back up to B3 as they make the run down now towards Indianapolis. And so this then is where it's going to be a bit more tricky if they are still side by side for Reigns as they get down towards the corner then. With the banking, it should make it a bit easier as compared to if it were a flat corner. But then, as they take the right hander, it will then make sure that they then have the inside line into the left hand. And here we go then, down towards Arnage. And the Lamborghini goes very deep on the brakes there. Just manages to perfectly place the car to stop the BMW from getting the cut underneath them again. And so that was a good bit of defensive driving there from De Boer. And so now then into Arnage. And things then staying as they were for now between those guys. Now then, De Boer versus Winus there. I think. No, not Winus. Winus is a minute and 7 seconds behind. Someone else is there.
It's another class, you would imagine. Yeah, Matthias de Groot in the AM class, so it's not a positional battle. They're in different classes, but they are out there battling with one another. That was quite great, quite fantastic car control, by the way, from Navarro de Boer there through Indianapolis. The Lamborghini was all sorts of out of shape there, but he still managed to save it and take the position all in one go. Was very impressive indeed. And so hats off to him for that. Meanwhile, out of Mulsanne corner come these two. Less than 10 minutes remaining in this one now, and they're about to go on to the penultimate lap, believe it or not. That's just the metrics we're working with around this extremely long and historic circuit at Le Mans here this afternoon. John Williams right in behind, Chris Chatterton just in front, and I wonder how Williams is going to play this, because is it going to be a case of trying to go through at every opportunity and just trying to make the moves where you can, or is he going to wait for the very final lap to dart out the slipstream and take the win right at the very end? I feel there's going to be a lot of tactical games going on here.
Could be an awful lot of work going on in the background there, and well, let's keep an eye on this one. As it is, they're likely to have this lap, and possibly the next lap could be the final tour around here. We'll wait and see. I suspect we might be able to sneak an extra 3rd lap in there as we head down now to Indianapolis once more. Chuck the car in before then winding it on into the left-hander down towards Arnage. You can see there in terms of the... Wait, no, that's not where we are. Never mind, I'm talking nonsense again. I've completely messed up the corner names there, so never mind then. We go into the last couple of corners on the circuit as it turns out instead. up towards Ford, and then of course the final turn as well. Just a few moments time here, and there you see the pit complex and all that sort of thing ahead of us. Onto the brakes then, both cars choosing to go just that ever so slightly into pit entry there to try and open up the apex of the corner as much as they can, and then a very, very early turn in there for Williams in the first part of that final chicane. That's then compromised their exit somewhat to then try and get a good drive out to chase on after Chanton. So the gap was 3.5 tenths of a second. I would wager will now start to just creep up slightly to about 4 tenths or so by then get to the time of the braking zone this corner here. And yes, there we are then, 3.9 tenths of a second as it is. So it's close, but not quite all the cigar there. And so through the Dunlop chicane they go, underneath the bridge, and now down through the rest of the first sector.
Down towards, down through the S's and towards Tete Rouge, where it's oh so important to get that run onto the Mulsanne straight. Chatterton does look like he maybe has the measure of John Williams here, and really ran it out wide through there. You have to be so careful of the slowdown, but Chatterton pretty much nailed that, and he does have quite a few car lengths on the fellow Mercedes. There will be a slipstream effect here though, and Williams will close in once again. Let's not forget Williams was fighting for a Pro-Am title in Season 4, which concluded at the end of 2022. Williams was just losing out, unfortunately, right at the end to Lucas Romano. That both of them move up to the Pro category here for Season 5. But John Williams has just gone from strength to strength. He's now right at the front of this race, and of the point standings as well. We stay on board with him towards the second Mulsanne chicane, and he gets ever closer to Chatterton all over again. There's going to be a lot of nerves here, and it does feel very tense between these two right now as well.
It does feel pretty tense, doesn't it? I mean, you can see how they're so close to one another. And it must be said that through the corners, it's looking as though Chanton's got just a little bit more of a balanced car underneath them. They're both riding the Mercedes, of course, both the AMGs. And so, as it is, then they're headed down this next part of the circuit, then down towards Indianapolis. And this time it actually is Indianapolis when I say it's Indianapolis. And so, as they make their way down there, then this, I think, is going to be one of the opportunities for Williams. Williams is getting closer now, but they don't end up going for it. No, I lie. It's Mulsanne. This, I tell you what, when it gets dark at this circuit, it does sometimes become a bit of a crapshoot for me in terms of which corner's which. But hey ho, there we go. We live and we learn. We move on. But as it is, then gap is very close here. Closest, or one of the closest gaps that we see anywhere on the circuit right now. The only other gap that's even comparable right now is between the last two in the pro class that's still running at the moment. That being between 5th and 6th drivers. Lindmo, who we're on board with now, who's just 2 tenths back from Reynolds, just in front. So there we are then, those two very close together. And then, of course, that gap toing and froing, as we see there. So we jump on board with these guys, it goes up to 4 tenths. And would you believe it, the guys up at the front in P1 and P2, that goes from 4 tenths to 2 tenths. So we've essentially just swapped the drivers for the same lap time, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, it's I'm surprised, I've got to say. I thought Reynolds would have enough to dispatch Limo here pretty quickly. But anyway, they will fight for this 5th place, heading towards the final lap of this race. The darkness now very much coming over here in northern France. Le Mans paved in darkness towards the end of 75 minutes of racing in the IMB World Series GT3 Championship for Season 5. This is round 4, and the second of 4 endurance rounds that we have during our 10-round season. Limbo getting a lot closer to Reynolds here. The points leader looking to grab every point he can get here this afternoon, but Limbo trying to take a few away from him right now. Into the Porsche curves they'll go. He won't be able to do it on this occasion. There's going to be quite some battles to settle here on the final lap. That one for 1st place, of course, and this one for 5th as well.
So then we've had the white flag now, so that means last lap of the Grand Prix. The race leaders having crossed the line, and Chris Jansen has suddenly opened up the taps a bit. They've gotten that gap suddenly from 2 tenths up to 6 tenths, as we then see the gap is about to go from 0 down to 0 possibly between these two. Certainly the AMG thought about it there of Lindmo, getting alongside the Lamborghini in towards the final couple of chicanes there, but then to all their credit, Reynolds was able to keep themselves ahead there and keep the fight going just that little bit longer. But the fight seems to be going out of John Williams at the moment. They are just losing time corner after corner at the moment. They're 7 8 tenths now of a second between them and Chris Chatterton. Now back down to 7.5 tenths of a second, whilst this battle here continues to rage at under 2 tenths of a second. Slight bit of oversteer there from the Lamborghini out of the exit of the chicane there, and that's then allowing the Mercedes to come back into the fray here slightly as they then try and get themselves sorted out then for this run onto the final straight. Then a little bit of a compromised line for the Mercedes through those corners, so that's going to lose them a little bit of time as they head onto the straight itself then. But if they're able to keep things as close as they are right now, they should then start to get that benefit of the slipstream any second now. And you could say it's already happened, because look at how that gap has come down. Was over a car length, now much less than a car length. Now they're almost side by side now on the way down in towards that first chicane on the back straight, then getting really close, so you could almost put a cigarette paper between them and nothing else really, as we then head down in towards that chicane. Once again, it looks as though the car on the inside, then bit of a better straight line speed setup, managed to brake later too, has that inside line, is able to fend off the Mercedes for the time being.
But it's a better exit from the Mercedes out of the second chicane. Oh, and Reynolds slowing down on the straight. It has to be another slowdown. And that might well be it. That might well be it in terms of that battle. Reynolds has to slow down on the exit of the second chicane, and that could be it for the battle. Meanwhile, for first place, there's all sorts going on here. 2 Lamborghinis getting lapped here in the way just a little bit. One of them not getting out of the way of Chris Chatterton towards the Mulsanne corner. That's Jeremy De Boiver in the Pro-Am field, who's even dropped away from the rest. Now he gets out the way, but might have just given Chatterton enough slipstream here to hang on. It looks like this more than half a second margin might not come back, and Chatterton might well have enough to win this race here.
Absolutely, yeah. It's one of these things where traffic in endurance racing can be a blessing or a curse. It's always going to result in a winner and a loser, and so as it is, in this instance, it's been very much blessing for Chatterton and curse for Williams as they head now into Indianapolis. Hey, there we go, I got it right this time. And as they then start to head their way down towards Arnage, we've got these guys then, that gap has come back down to Williams' credit, but at this stage in the circuit where we've got all the twisty bits to finish out the lap, this is unlikely to be an opportunity for them to pass here. The only real overtaking opportunities I would say now are going to be into these last couple of chicanes, so they're going to have to prioritize following as well as they possibly can here now behind Chatterton, try and get this gap to come on down as they come towards these last few braking zones here on the circuit, and that's exactly what they're doing. Now down to 2 tenths of a second between these cars. Was 3, now 2, nearly now under 2 tenths of a second, as we see then different lines, even this final lap then being taken by the cars trying to prioritize exit as much as they possibly can. And right now, looking back, it looks as though Williams has lost a little bit to Chatterton as they go through the final few corners then up towards the chicane now. First of the 2 chicanes, first the 4th chicane will come along, and then the final corner, but I think that Chatterton has got this one.
He looks like he has. Williams gave it a right good go through the Porsche curves there, but he's not quite close enough. In one of the closest finishes of this season so far, Chris Chatterton is going to win at Le Mans. John Williams misses out by just half a second, but after 75 minutes of racing, that's what it came down to. Not seconds, but tenths of a second between those 2 drivers. A good fight to the very end, but Chris Chatterton just had enough pace for him at the end there. Jason Dilworth rounds off his debut with a 3rd place here today, with Taylor Lane dropping back dramatically towards the end of this one for 4th. Lindmo will see off Reynolds for 5th as well, and that will do it for all of the pro drivers who get to the end of this race. Louis Poubier has had things all his own way so far in this one in Pro-Am, and it's not going to change now. He's got more than 20 seconds over Dean Timms here at the end, and so he's going to take quite the winning margin here at the end of this race. After getting pole overall, he set the fastest lap time of anybody, not just in Pro-Am, but in the field as a whole during qualifying. And it's no surprise to see him convert that into a race win. He will take it by quite some distance indeed, and improve his championship position from down in 9th, where he started today. Dean Timms will be at 2nd and had too much pace for the rest of them. Best of the rest, you could say, with Eva van der Linden also on the podium as well. But unlike in Pro, the gaps in Pro-Am and Am get quite a lot bigger.
They certainly do. It's been an interesting race really for the other 2 classes. Obviously, as we talked about earlier on, Pro initially a bit more fanned out. Then we started to see those closer battles forming throughout the Pro field. We're going to see a replay now of the 3rd place jump here. Here we go then. So De Boiver 3rd to 7th. We're going to see an enormous crash then somewhere must have happened for them, and it looks like they just get tagged round from behind. And that then means that in addition to that, then they have to put it in reverse. They can't drive forwards out because of the tyres right in front of them. So insult very much added to injury there for Dubova, which is a great big shame for them after some great moves that we saw, particularly that defensive driving down in towards Indianapolis, for example, that we saw earlier on, Ewan. And so as a result then, it is Archie Lands who will come round the final couple of corners then to take win in the AM class here today at Le Mans. Not a bad one to have on the CV, especially in what was a very congested, tight race for the AM cars at the beginning of this one.
Yeah, and Sam Van Brule will extend his points lead as well here today from 30 points to even more, with his nearest rival Carl Pearce not scoring any points. Navarro de Boiva from 3rd, just having that spin right at the very end as we just saw. It's another great day for the Porsche driver, as Jerome Reigns is going to round off the podium drivers here as well in AM. He's going to come across the line to stand on that podium where Navarro de Boiva may well believe he should have been, but he does drop to 7th in class, and he was nowhere near getting any of those positions back either. Gus Franken will just see off Tony van der Linden to the line for 5th place. That's just behind Jarmo Sastimoinen, by the way, who started from the pit lane today and still managed to finish in 4th. So hats off to him. And there is Navarro de Boiva. He will move up to 2nd place in points, I think, but or maybe not actually. We'll do the maths afterwards, of course, and for the next round. But he loses out on the last lap, drops to 7th as a result of contact that didn't really look like his fault at all. And finally, Matthias de Groot and Kurt van Hoornacker will come across the line in 8th and 9th to round off this race at Le Mans. And I have to say, a very enjoyable one as well, and even had a decent finish for the overall win as well. We can't ask for much more than that.
Absolutely not. No, when you get to see some good fights throughout the field, you know it's been a good day of racing, really, and especially when you see a nice tight fight for the win like that of all the cars. In fact, it was the smallest margin across the line was between the two. But no, I lie. It was beaten by 100th of a second for the fight between Franken and the car behind them. So yeah, there we are then. There is Chris Jadson as your winner of the Pro-Am, of the Pro class rather, and of the race overall, with John Williams just behind by 0.4 of a second. Then Jason Dilworth, Taylor Lane, Hakon Lindmo, Stuart Reynolds, Harry Wills, Kai Dalziel, Max Furtwängler, and then Lucas Romano as well, with those latter 3 out of the points after not being able to complete enough laps here in this one.
Absolutely. Not the case for many in Pro-Am, actually. Lewis Boubier taking quite some distance to the line there ahead of Dean Timms. Eva van der Linden was 3rd ahead of Timothy van der Broek. Then Thomas Pugh inside the top 5. Francois Pedro 6th ahead of Brayton Back, who made up good progress during the race. Chris Thacker, after that long first pit stop, recovered to 8th ahead of Dirk Bouts. And Marcel Brayton back inside the top 10. Jeremy de Boiver and Didier de Vlaminck off the lead lap. So was Stuart Reines. Mark Fleming won't score points after being 11 laps down. Archie Lands wins in the AM category ahead of Sam Van Brule. Over half a minute back for Jerome Reigns, who's still on the podium. Jarmo Sastimoinen from the pit lane to 4th, ahead of Gus Franken and Tony van der Linden, who battled to the line. Navarro de Boiva finishing a minute back by the end, ahead of Matthias de Groot and Kurt van Hoornacker, who also battled to the line. Jurgen Knockop and James Slates off the lead lap, with Carl Pearce not scoring any points as a result of being too far back. Or too many laps off the lead, I should say. So that will just about do it for the racing. Now let's have a little bit of a chat to some of these drivers after that race. First of all, the overall winner, Chris Chatterton. Chris, welcome to the booth. Good to have you here. And congratulations on the win. It was a nice fight to watch. It went right to the very end. Just tell us a little bit about that last lap from your perspective.
Yeah, well, John made a bit of a mistake coming out of the final chicane, which bought me, at the end, the couple of attempts that I needed to keep him into Indianapolis. But the lap traffic had me nervous, I'm not going to lie, because I didn't want to get involved in their race and didn't want them to get involved in our race. But they managed it well, to be fair to them, and there was no real benefit to either me or John. So, yeah, it was a really, really hard fought race with John from the start-finish line to the start-finish line. You know, that's probably the hardest race I've done since Bathurst, when I had Andy Miller breathing down my neck last season.
It was certainly an intense race, I can certainly imagine. We've had 2 of these endurance rounds now to go with 2 of the sprint rounds. I know they've been at slightly odd circuits, with the Nordschleife and Le Mans being so long. But just how are these 75-minute races different to the sprint races both this season and also previously? Because you have been here for previous seasons in this championship, of course. How has it changed the dynamic of the series?
I think the endurance races let you get into a rhythm, right? And like the sprint races, I don't like reverse grids because it introduces chaos. I'm not going to lie. I know that that's for you guys, not for us, but I prefer the endurance races just because you've got 75 minutes. You know what your tyres are going to do. You know what fuel you need to do, and you can just settle in to a rhythm, whereas the sprints are a bit more chaotic and not really for me, I'm not going to lie.
I understand what you mean, but I enjoy them. so I get your point about it being for us or whatever, because I guess as a driver, I probably wouldn't either. Either way, Chris, congratulations on your win here tonight at Le Mans. And thanks very much for coming to chat to us.
No, thank you. And can I just shout out the guys at the team, because I've had a really tough couple of days. And the team boss, Jason Dilworth, who ended up joining us tonight, has really helped me out with a few things over the past few days. So yeah, thanks to Jason and the team for supporting me. This wins to them.
Absolutely, that's excellent to hear. Chris Chatterton victorious here at Le Mans here this afternoon, overall and in the pro category as well. Just behind him was John Williams, who also joins us now. And John, we'll get your side of the story from here as well. We just spoken to Chris about that last lap. What was that? What were those final moments like for you?
Hey guys, well, what can I say? I had nothing for him. He was mega quick. I pulled out everything I could, but in the end, he was just too good. Even in tow, I couldn't even close him down in tow.
We've obviously mentioned a lot about the tow in our racing, and sometimes it's criticised for being quite strong or whatever, and these races at Le Mans do stay together quite a lot sometimes. So what was the racing around here like today in comparison to last season? I think we had the media day last season, didn't we, at this circuit? Or maybe a proper round. But what was the rating like, particularly at Le Mans today?
I love the new draft system. It stops all the people sticking to you just because of tow. They've actually got to get the lap times in. They've actually got to put the practice in and get the lap times out. At the beginning of the week, I couldn't even get out the 57s. And then today, because of you pushing me that extra bit, I got down to I think it was a 56.4 or 52.4, sorry. So yeah, you've actually got to lap and earn the time this time instead of just getting dragged around the track. I love it.
Absolutely, it's certainly changed. John, congratulations on that second place here today, and thanks very much for coming to chat to us.
Cheers, guys. Take care.
Thanks very much. John Williams, second place here today at Le Mans. Lewis Boubier in the Pro-Am field was miles ahead of the rest, and we can chat to him now. Lewis, welcome to the move as well. Good to have you here. Victorious today in the Pro-Am category by more than 20 seconds, but I want to rewind right the way to qualifying. You set the best lap of anybody, ever, as well as the pro drivers as well. Just did that surprise you a little bit by any chance?
Yeah, it did surprise me. The lap I did was very good, especially on qualifying run since the tyres weren't up to temperature. But the times I saw like Chris Chatterton and John doing, they were quite a bit further ahead. So I think I just got a good lap in and they didn't. But I was really surprised to be P1 out of everyone. So the practice came in handy.
I saw you mention in respect. Somebody was joking, obviously, earlier on in the drivers' chat when they said that you should be a pro for this round. But you replied very swiftly, saying that it should be only this round that you're a pro. What is it about Le Mans that you click with so well?
Well, I think there's a few things. I've driven this race an awful lot, other than maybe Daytona and Spa. This is my most driven track. BMWs are always really good around here. I wouldn't say it was quite on the Mercedes level at the moment with the BOP, but still it's really good. And then another reason, I upgraded my brake pedal as well, so I think that's given me an extra few temps.
Maybe it has helped indeed. Certainly didn't hurt you today. Congratulations, Lewis, on the win here tonight, and thanks very much for chatting to us.
Excellent, thank you guys.
Thanks very much. Lewis Boubier, victorious in the Pro-Am category here today at Le Mans. And finally, the AM Class second place, AM Class runner-up, Sam Barula joining us now. Sam, welcome to the booth as well. Good to have you here. 5 seconds behind the winner by the end. Just tell us a little bit about your thoughts after that race. Are you a little bit disappointed maybe that you couldn't quite get the win?
Well, I obviously disappointed because I was in the lead for a big part of the race, but also I got into this race. I'm driving the Porsche, which is really slow in the straight line, so I kind of came in this race with the thought that I was gonna lose. So this is still a really good placement for me, and I'm happy. And if I'm gonna be really honest, I think I'm still getting the win because Archie is probably gonna get a penalty for something he did to a different driver on the 4th lap. So. That's kind of why I'm in here as well. So,
Oh dear. Okay.
yeah, stirring up
that.
drama here. That's my goal.
That's just, oh dear, this could be. I could see this going wrong, but anyway, yeah, we'll obviously see how that goes after the race. That's all to be settled after the fact. But I want to focus a little bit more on the season. Up ahead of us, because you mentioned there that the Porsche is not great in a straight line, and that's been very apparent over the last 4 months, both real life and in sim as well. Do you see that as that being a worry for the remainder of this season? Because I'm looking at the schedule and some of the tracks we've got coming up, the likes of Monza and Bathurst and Daytona, all circuits where significant amounts of the track are spent, on straights, flat out, and doing this straight line speed kind of business. Is that a bit of a concern with you driving the Porsche?
Yeah, for sure is, and we're really looking into that already. Just looking forward, and that's why I'm happy to have a big championship lead right now, because I will probably not do very good in those. Bathurst will probably be okay, but Daytona and Monza will, just not be good. So we're preparing ourselves for that.
Absolutely, it could well be difficult, but let's see. Sam, congratulations on second place, and well, I'm not going to say it, but second place for now. Congratulations, thanks very much for chatting to us.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Sam very much.
Thank you.
Place there, and I'm not saying any more because it could go wrong. So yeah, first time we've ever actually had someone here coming in here intentionally stir the pot. But anyway, it doesn't mean it really. So there we are. But a very enjoyable evening once again. Daniel, I'll bring you back in once more after the interviews. It's been fun to be alongside you for this one. 75 minutes of a race here this evening, and it was a good race. We can't ask for much more than a half-second margin between 1 and 2.
No, absolutely not. Sometimes when you do one of these endurance style races or just a longer race, you end up seeing, winner is ahead by however many seconds, and it's sort of a bit more like, oh, right, okay, well, we all showed up at least, and that's sort of the run of things, really. But yes, no, to have a battle all the way to the end where you couldn't really quite tell maybe until the last sector or so, and then it was sort of a bit sealed up at that point. It was very enjoyable, very good fun indeed, yeah.
It certainly was. It's been fantastic to have you alongside me as well for this week. Next week, we will be returning to Zolder and returning to the sprint race format once again. 25-minute sprint race, 50-minute feature race indeed. So make sure you catch us same time, same place for that as well. The US version of this championship will also be coming up in roughly 3 hours' time. So make sure you stick around on the YouTube channel for that as well, and make sure you tune in for that. But for now, that's it from us here at Le Mans here this evening. Another fantastic race in the IMB World Series GT3 Championship for Season 5. But for now, we'll bid you our farewells. I've been Yoda Leary alongside Daniel Gilligan here this evening. And until we catch you next week at Zolder, it's goodbye for now.